The Galactic Council had watched humanity for 300 years. They had seen the strange two-legged creatures crawl out from their small blue planet. They had watched them build rockets with fire and metal. They had seen them reach their moon, then their neighboring planets, then the stars closest to their sun. And with each step humanity took, the Council grew more afraid. The Council was made of 12 ancient species. They had ruled the Milky Way galaxy for 9 million years. They had seen thousands of young species rise and fall. They knew the patterns. They knew the dangers. And they knew that humanity was different in a way that made their old hearts cold with fear. It was not that humans were strong. They had bodies like mountains and could crush stone with their hands. It was not that humans were smart. They had minds like vast oceans and could solve problems that took other species centuries. What scared the Council was something else entirely. Humans changed too fast. They learned too quickly. They worked together too easily. And worst of all, they dreamed of things that should not be possible. Ambassador stood in the great chamber on Nexus Prime. The room was larger than any building on Earth. Light came from crystals that floated in the air. Around her sat beings of all shapes and sizes. Some looked like trees made of glass. Some looked like clouds of colored smoke. Some had no shape at all that human eyes could understand. The High Arbiter was named. He was a creature made of living crystal, and when he spoke, his whole body rang like a bell. He read the verdict in a voice that filled the chamber like thunder. Earth and all 17 human colony worlds were to be quarantined. No human ship would be allowed past the boundary line. No alien technology would be shared with humans. No contact would be made except through official channels. Humanity would be kept in its small corner of the galaxy until it grew up. That was how said it. Until they matured sufficiently, but knew what those words really meant. Forever. The Council meant to keep humanity in a cage forever. Did not cry. She did not shout. She simply put her hands behind her back and looked at the ancient beings around her. "You are making a mistake," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. Flickered with what might have been amusement, the light inside his crystal body danced. "Your species has existed for only 200,000 years. We have lived for millions. We have seen 1,000 races like yours burn themselves out. Young species always think they are special. They always think the rules do not apply to them. The quarantine is for your protection as much as ours." Smiled. It was a small smile, just a slight curve of her lips. But the Council had learned to find that expression deeply troubling. When humans smiled like that, bad things usually followed. "I was not warning you about us," said. "I was warning you about what happens when you put something in a cage that was never meant to be caged." Before anyone could respond, she pressed a button on her wrist device. A single packet of data flew across space at the speed of light, passing through relay stations and communication networks until it reached a small blue planet called Earth. The guards came then. They were tall beings with 4 arms and skin like armor. They escorted from the chamber with firm but gentle hands. She did not resist. She had done what she needed to do. Back on Earth, in an underground facility beneath the mountains of Korea, a man named received the message. He was the director of a project that officially did not exist. The facility around him was hidden so well that even most human governments did not know about it. The walls were thick with metal and earth. The rooms were filled with machines that hummed with quiet power. Opened the message. It contained only one word, GRENLIGHT. He took a deep breath. Then he turned to face the people gathered in the room behind him. There were scientists with tired eyes and coffee-stained coats. There were engineers with grease under their fingernails. There were dreamers and builders and thinkers, all of them waiting for this moment. "They said no," announced. His voice was steady, but inside his chest his heart was beating fast. "The Council has decided to lock us away. They think we are too young, too dangerous, too wild." The room was silent. Some faces showed anger, some showed fear, some showed nothing at all. Walked to a large screen on the wall. With a touch, he brought up an image. It showed a galaxy, not the Milky Way but another one. A spiral of stars so far away that its light took 2.5 million years to reach Earth. The Andromeda Galaxy. They want to keep us in a cage, continued. They want to decide what we can do, where we can go, what we can become. They have been the rulers of this galaxy for 9 million years, and they are afraid of what we might do if we are free. He turned back to face the gathered humans. So we will not ask for permission anymore. We will not beg for scraps from their table. We will not wait for them to decide that we are worthy. His hand pointed at the image of Andromeda. If they will not let us have this galaxy, we will find another one. Project Exodus is now active. We have 18 months to build a fleet that can carry every human being out of the Milky Way. We have 18 months to do what the Council says is impossible. A woman in the back raised her hand. Her name was, and she was the person in the room, maybe the person on Earth. Director, she said, the Council's fastest ships would take thousands of years to reach Andromeda. How exactly do you plan to get there? Smiled. It was the same smile had given to the Council. That, he said, is where your fold drive comes in, Doctor. You have been telling us for years that your theory could work. That space itself could be bent and folded like paper. Now you have 18 months to prove it. His eyes went wide. Then slowly a matching smile spread across her face. 18 months, she repeated. I will need more coffee. The room filled with sudden noise. People talking, planning, arguing, dreaming. The impossible task had begun. Far above them, the stars of the Milky Way shone down on a planet that refused to accept the word no. The Council thought they had solved the human problem. They thought the cage was secure. They had no idea what was coming. The Council's quarantine was built on 3 things. First, there were patrol fleets. Thousands of ships circled human space like wolves around a campfire, watching for any attempt to escape. Second, there were sensor networks. Billions of tiny machines floated in the darkness between stars, detecting any ship that tried to slip through. Third, and most important, there were the laws of physics themselves. Faster-than-light travel required something called element zero cores. Only the elder races knew how to make them. Without these cores, a ship could never go faster than light, and if you could not go faster than light, you were trapped. The nearest star outside human space was 4 light-years away. At normal speed, that journey would take 40,000 years. The Council did not need to guard every exit. The universe itself was the cage. Or so they believed. Doctor had spent 40 years of her life working on a theory that everyone said was crazy. Her colleagues laughed at her. The scientific journals rejected her papers. Even her own students sometimes looked at her with pity in their eyes, but did not care about what others thought. She cared only about what was true. Her idea was simple to explain but almost impossible to build. She called it the fold drive. Instead of pushing a ship faster than light, it would fold space itself. Imagine a piece of paper with 2 dots on opposite ends. The normal way to travel between the dots is to move across the paper. But what if you could fold the paper until the 2 dots touched? Then you could step from one to the other instantly, without traveling at all. That was the fold drive, folding space like paper. The problem was power. To fold space, even a little bit required more energy than a star could produce. That was why everyone said it was impossible. That was why the elder races had never tried it. The numbers simply did not work. His assistant was a young man named Minyu. He was brilliant in his own right, but he did not have faith. They sat together in her laboratory, surrounded by screens filled with equations that would make most people's heads hurt. I have run the calculations 10,000 times, Minyu said. He rubbed his tired eyes. The power requirements are too high. Even if we used every nuclear reactor on Earth, we could not fold space by 1 centimeter. Was quiet for a long moment. She stared at the numbers on her screen. Then slowly she began to smile. You are thinking too big, she said. Minyu frowned. Too big. The problem is that we need more power, not less. No, pulled up a new set of equations. The problem is that we are looking at the wrong source of power. Everyone looks at stars. Everyone looks at nuclear reactions. Everyone looks at big things. But I have been looking at something very, very small. She pointed at the screen. The equations were different now. They described something called quantum foam, the tiny bubbles of energy that existed at the smallest scale of reality, smaller than atoms, smaller than the parts of atoms, so small that the elder races had never thought to look there. At this scale, explained, the universe is not empty, it is boiling with energy, infinite energy just waiting to be used. The elder races never found it because they stopped looking. They decided they knew everything there was to know, but we kept looking. Minyu stared at the equations. His mouth fell open. "This is real," he whispered. "This is real," confirmed. "And if I am right, we can build a fold drive that runs on nothing but the fabric of space itself." It took 6 months to build the first test engine. It was small and ugly, a mess of wires and metal boxes held together with tape and hope. They installed it on a tiny ship called the Dandelion and sent it to the orbit of Neptune, far from the Council's watching eyes. Admiral was in command of the test. He was an old soldier with gray hair and steady hands. He had fought in the wars before the quarantine, back when humans still thought they could earn the Council's respect. Now he knew better. Respect would never be given. It had to be taken. The Dandelion floated in the darkness, a small spark of light against the giant blue planet behind it. Inside the ship, a crew of 3 brave volunteers waited. They knew they might die. The engine had never been tested. Anything could go wrong. "Begin the test," ordered. On the ship, the pilot pressed a button. The fold drive hummed to life. Energy flowed through circuits that had never existed before. Space began to bend. And then the Dandelion was gone. For 3 terrible seconds, every screen showed nothing. The ship had vanished from all sensors. Felt his heart stop. Had they killed those 3 brave people? Then the screens lit up again. The Dandelion had reappeared, 3 light minutes away, a distance that should have taken hours to travel at normal speed. The ship had crossed it in an instant. The communication channel crackled. The pilot's voice came through, shaking with excitement. "It worked, we folded space. We actually folded space." The control room erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, some cried, stood still, letting the noise wash over him. He was thinking about what this meant. No element zero, no permission from the Council, just human minds solving a problem that ancient species had declared unsolvable. He turned to, who stood nearby with tears running down her face. "How fast can we build more?" he asked. She wiped her eyes. "We need to scale up the design, build factories, train workers. 18 months is not much time." "Then we have no time to waste." Over the next 11 months, humanity worked in secret. Fold drives were built in hidden factories inside asteroids. Giant colony ships were constructed inside hollowed-out moons where no sensor could see them. Populations on every human world were told to prepare for emergency evacuation, though they were not told why. The Council watched the quarantine borders. They watched for ships trying to escape. They watched for signals reaching out to alien friends. They never thought to look inward. They never imagined that the humans were not trying to break through the cage. They were planning to leave it behind entirely. In her laboratory, worked 20 hours a day. She improved the fold drive again and again. Each version was more powerful, more stable, more reliable. By the end, she had created an engine that could carry a ship across millions of light years in a single jump. The impossible had become possible. And the Council had no idea. Was 16 years old when she learned that everything was about to change. She lived in New Seoul, a city on a colony world 300 light years from Earth. Her life was ordinary. She went to school. She argued with her parents. She dreamed about the future without knowing what it would hold. Her grandmother was named. She was 72 years old, with white hair and hands that had once built starship engines. Now she was retired, living quietly in a small apartment with too many plants and not enough visitors. But on this day, she called to come see her. When arrived, her grandmother was sitting by the window, looking at the stars. There was something strange in her eyes, something that looked like excitement mixed with fear. "Sit down," said. "I need to tell you something important." Sat, she had never heard her grandmother speak like this before. The old woman's voice was serious in a way that made stomach tight with worry. "You know about the quarantine," began. "You learned about it in school. The council decided that humans are too dangerous to be free. They locked us in our little corner of the galaxy like animals in a zoo." "Yes, grandmother, everyone knows this." "What everyone does not know," continued, "is that the quarantine is about to become meaningless. In 30 days we are leaving." Frowned, "Leaving where?" "The council watches every border. No ship can get past their patrols." Her grandmother smiled. It was a smile full of secrets. "We are not going past their patrols. We are going somewhere they cannot follow. We are going to another galaxy." For a long moment could not speak. Another galaxy. That was 2.5 million light-years away. That was impossible. That was crazy. She looked at her grandmother's face, searching for signs that this was a joke. There were none. How? Finally managed to ask. Smart people found a way. Engineers and scientists and dreamers who refused to accept that we should live in a cage. They built something called the Fold Drive. It bends space itself. With it, we can travel to Andromeda in a single jump. Reached out and took her granddaughter's hand. "In 30 days, every human being will leave the Milky Way. 8 billion people. 17 colony worlds. All of Earth. We will carry our whole species to a new home where no one can tell us what to do or who to be." Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Parents told children. Leaders addressed crowds. Messages spread through secret channels, reaching every human ear. The greatest secret in history was being revealed, piece by piece, family by family. Not everyone believed it at first. Some thought it was a trick. Some thought it was a test of loyalty. But the proof was hard to argue with. Hidden ships revealed themselves. Fold drives were demonstrated. The impossible became real before their eyes. The logistics of moving 8 billion people were staggering. Every human settlement had to be emptied. Every piece of technology had to be loaded onto ships. Nothing could be left behind that might give the council clues about the Fold Drive. And it all had to happen at the same time, across 17 worlds separated by hundreds of light years. Captain was in command of the Evergreen, one of the largest colony ships ever built. It was 3 kilometers long and could carry 500,000 people in its massive hull. For months, his crew had worked to prepare it in secret. Now, finally, the passengers were arriving. Stood in the main loading bay, watching families stream up the ramps. Children held their parents' hands. Old people were pushed in floating chairs. Everyone carried bags filled with whatever they could not bear to leave behind. Photos, books, small treasures that meant nothing to anyone else but meant everything to them. "Keep moving," the crew called out. "Find your assigned sections, help those who need help." There was no panic. That surprised more than anything. 8 billion people were leaving the only galaxy they had ever known, and they moved with calm determination. Perhaps it was because humans had always been wanderers. Perhaps it was because they had spent 3 centuries being told what they could not do, and now they finally had a chance to prove the council wrong. Or perhaps it was simply because humans were very good at doing impossible things when they had no other choice. In her small cabin on a transport ship, pressed her face against the viewport. Below her, New Seoul was growing smaller. She could see the city where she had grown up, the parks where she had played, the school where she had complained about homework. All of it was shrinking, becoming just another patch of light on the planet's surface. "Will we ever come back?" she asked. Her grandmother stood beside her, one wrinkled hand resting on shoulder. "Maybe someday, when we are ready, when they are ready. But first we have to grow without cages. We have to become what we were always meant to be." "What is that?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I do not know. That is the wonderful thing. No one has ever told us what we could become if we had no limits. Now we will find out." Admiral coordinated the operation from a command ship hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. Screens surrounded him, showing the status of every evacuation. Green lights meant on schedule. Yellow lights meant minor delays. Red lights meant problems. Almost everything was green. "Earth evacuation at 90%, an officer reported. Colony 7 at 85%. They had some transport issues, but they are catching up. Colony 12 is complete, all ships loaded and waiting." Nodded, the plan was working. 17 months of preparation, and now it was all coming together. "What about the Council?" he asked. "Any sign they have noticed?" "Nothing, Admiral. Their patrol ships are still watching the borders. Their sensors are looking outward. They have no idea." Allowed himself a small smile. The Council had made a mistake that many powerful beings made. They assumed that the only way to escape a cage was to break through the walls. They never considered that someone might simply step outside the cage entirely. 12 hours to departure," he announced. "All ships confirm readiness." Across human space, engines warmed up. Fold drives charged with energy pulled from the fabric of space itself. 8 billion hearts beat faster as the final countdown began. The Milky Way was about to lose its most troublesome children. And the Council still had no idea. High Arbiter was having a normal day when everything changed. He was reviewing reports in his private chamber, the same reports he had reviewed for centuries. Trade disputes, border incidents, minor conflicts between minor species. The Milky Way was peaceful under the Council's guidance and liked it that way. Then the alarm sounded. The sound was ancient, a deep bell tone that echoed through the crystal halls of Nexus Prime. Had not heard it in 800 years. It meant something impossible was happening. He rushed to the main control center, his crystalline body ringing with each step. Officers from a dozen species were already there, staring at screens with expressions of shock and fear. "Report," commanded. A officer turned to face him. There were beings of pure thought, their bodies made of floating geometric shapes. This one's shapes were spinning with agitation. 17 human colony worlds have gone dark, the officer said. All at the same moment. Communication has stopped. Sensor data has become scrambled. Ships that should be in transit have simply vanished. Felt something he had not felt in millions of years. Confusion. "Show me," he said. The main screen filled with a map of human space. Red warning lights covered every human world. Energy readings were chaotic. Ship signatures had disappeared. It was as if a giant hand had reached down and erased humanity from existence. A weapon asked, "Are they attacking themselves?" "Unknown. We have never seen anything like this." More alerts came in as they watched. Earth itself went dark. The human, with its 4 billion remaining inhabitants, simply stopped sending signals. The last image from their observation satellites showed cities full of light one moment and empty darkness the next. The Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in 800 years, all 12 elder species gathered without the usual ceremonies. There was no time for ritual. Something unprecedented was happening. "They have destroyed themselves," the delegate said. His voice was like grinding rocks. "We have seen it before. Young species sometimes choose death over submission. It is tragic but not unexpected." "I do not think they are dead," the delegate replied. His geometric shape spun thoughtfully. The energy signatures are wrong for destruction. There was no explosion, no radiation. They simply stopped being where they were. Then where are they? No one had an answer. In the corner of the chamber stood the new human ambassador. His name was, and he had volunteered to stay behind when everyone else left. His job was simple: delay the council as long as possible, then deliver a message they would never forget. Turned his crystalline gaze toward the human. "You know what is happening," he said. It was not a question. Smiled. It was the same smile that had unsettled the council for generations. The same smile that Ambassador had worn years ago when she delivered her warning. "Yes," said calmly, "I know exactly what is happening." "Explain now." Walked forward until he stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings who could destroy him with a thought. He showed no fear. Why should he? The hard part was already done. "We are not dying," he said. "We are leaving." The chamber buzzed with confused voices, raised one crystalline limb for silence. "Leaving where? You have no faster than light capability. Your fastest ships would take 40,000 years to reach the nearest star outside your quarantine zone. Even if you tried to run, we would catch you in hours." Who said anything about staying in this galaxy? The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "Impossible," the delegate growled. "Intergalactic travel requires technology that does not exist. Even our most advanced ships cannot cross the void between galaxies." "Your ships cannot," agreed. "Ours can." He pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, a map showing the Milky Way and, far away, the spiral shape of the Andromeda Galaxy. "Right now," continued, 8 billion human beings are crossing the intergalactic void. They are traveling 2.5 million light-years in a single jump, using technology that we developed ourselves. No Element Zero, no help from any elder race, just human stubbornness and a refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Some called a liar. Some demanded immediate military action. Some simply stared in silent shock. Cut through the noise with a voice like shattering glass. "You expect us to believe that your primitive species developed technology beyond anything we have created in 9 million years." "I do not expect you to believe anything," replied. "Check your sensors, send your scouts. In a few hours you will have all the proof you need." He pressed another button on his device. "This is my final message as the last human ambassador to the Galactic Council. We did not want to leave this way. We would have preferred to grow alongside you, to learn from your wisdom and share our energy. But you gave us no choice. You locked us in a cage and threw away the key." Looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had ruled the galaxy since before his species existed. "So we built our own door, and now we are walking through it. Do not try to follow us. By the time you figure out how our technology works, we will be so far ahead that you will never catch up. This is not a threat. It is simply the truth." He smiled one last time. "Goodbye. Maybe we will meet again someday, when you have learned that cages do not work on species that refuse to believe in walls." Then he pressed a final button, and his ship, hidden in orbit around Nexus Prime itself, activated its fold drive. Vanished from the chamber, leaving nothing behind but a ripple in space that the Council's sensors could not even properly measure. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the delegate said quietly, "Send scouts to Andromeda, maximum speed." It took 4 days for the fastest Council ships to confirm what had said. The human fleet had crossed the intergalactic void. They were already decelerating in a new galaxy, 2.5 million light-years from the Council's reach. The scouts tried to follow. They could not. Whatever method the humans had used to fold space, it was beyond anything the elder races understood. Their ships could not reproduce it. Their scientists could not explain it. The cage was empty, the prisoners were gone. And for the first time in 9 million years, the Galactic Council had absolutely no idea what to do. Andromeda welcomed humanity with silence and space. There were no council patrols here, no sensor networks watching every move, no ancient species deciding what humans could and could not do. There was only an entire galaxy waiting to be explored, with more stars than anyone could count in 1,000 lifetimes. The first years were hard. Building new homes always is. But humans had been building new homes since they first walked out of Africa 100,000 years ago. They knew how to survive. They knew how to grow. Was among the first generation born in the new galaxy. She grew up on a world called Hope, orbiting a yellow star much like Earth's sun. By the time she was 30 years old, humanity had established 50 thriving worlds across Andromeda. By the time she was 50, it was 500. The fold drive opened paths between stars like trails through a forest. Ships jumped from system to system, carrying settlers and supplies, scientists and dreamers. Every year brought new discoveries, new planets, new resources, new possibilities. And they were not alone. Humanity found other species in Andromeda. Most were young, still bound to single worlds, looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone else was out there. A few were older and more advanced, but they were nothing like the Council. They did not fear change. They did not build cages for younger species. They were simply curious about the strange newcomers who had traveled so impossibly far. Humanity approached them not as conquerors but as neighbors. The lessons of the Council's arrogance had been learned well. When humans met the gentle singers of the seventh world, they traded music and stories. When they met the mechanical builders of the outer rim, they shared engineering knowledge. When they met the ancient and wise keepers of the core, they sat and listened to tales of galaxies beyond even Andromeda. Each meeting made humanity stronger, not through conquest but through connection. Admiral lived long enough to see the 100th anniversary of the Exodus. He was 140 years old now, kept alive by medical technology that would have seemed like magic to his ancestors. His hair was white, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held the same fire they had held when he commanded the Evergreen all those years ago. They asked him to give a speech. He did not want to at first. He had never liked speeches. But his granddaughter convinced him that people needed to hear from someone who remembered the old days, someone who could remind them why they had come so far. He stood on a stage on Hope, looking out at a crowd of millions. Billions more watched through screens across 500 worlds. Behind him, the unfamiliar stars of Andromeda sparkled in the night sky. 100 years ago, we were prisoners. The Galactic Council looked at humanity and saw a threat. They saw a species that changed too fast, dreamed too wildly, refused to accept limits. So they built a cage around us. They told us to stay small. They told us to wait until we grew up. He paused, letting the words sink in. They were not entirely wrong. We were dangerous. We were wild. We were young and foolish and full of fire, but they made one mistake. They thought those were weaknesses. They thought that if they just contained us long enough, we would become like them. Safe, predictable, tame. A smile crossed his weathered face. They did not understand that our wildness was not a flaw to be fixed. It was a gift to be used. Our refusal to accept limits was not immaturity. It was the engine that drives us forward. Every time someone told us something was impossible, we treated it as a challenge. Every wall they built, we found a way around. He gestured at the stars above him. And now look at us. 500 worlds, 8 billion souls, growing to 10 billion and beyond. We have done in 1 century what the Council could not do in 9 million years. Not because we are stronger or smarter, but because we never forgot how to dream. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The Council feared what we might become. They were right to fear, but not because we would destroy or conquer, because we would surpass. And now we have. He stepped back from the podium, suddenly feeling his age. The crowd erupted in cheers that rolled across the planet like thunder. Far away, in a quiet house on the colony world of Haven, Ambassador watched the speech on her screen. She was very old now, past 120, and she spent most of her days in a garden filled with flowers from Earth and a dozen other worlds. Her granddaughter sat beside her, was 30 years old, born in Andromeda, raised under unfamiliar stars. She had never known the quarantine, never known limits, never known cages. "He speaks well," said as the speech ended. "He always did," replied, "even when he was young and hot-headed." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the garden. "Grandmother," finally said, "what will happen when the council figures out how to follow us? They have had 100 years. Surely they are getting close." Considered the question. She had thought about it many times over the decades. "When they come," she said, "we will welcome them, as equals, as neighbors, as fellow travelers in a universe with room enough for everyone willing to grow. And if they do not want to be equals, if they try to put us in a cage again." Smiled. It was the same smile that had unsettled the council a lifetime ago, passed down through generations. "Then they will learn the same lesson they learned before. You cannot cage a species that refuses to believe in walls. You cannot limit a people who treat every impossible thing as a challenge. We have grown beyond their reach now. Whatever they bring, we will face it, and we will overcome it, because that is what we do." She took her granddaughter's hand. "But I do not think it will come to that. 100 years is a long time. Perhaps they have learned. Perhaps they are ready to see us not as threats but as what we always were, children who grew up, students who surpassed their teachers, prisoners who became pioneers." Above them, the stars of Andromeda shone down on a species that had refused to accept the word no. In the 100 years since the Exodus, humanity had built wonders that would have seemed like dreams to their ancestors. Cities that floated among clouds, ships that sailed on beams of light, machines that could heal any wound, solve any problem, answer any question. But the greatest wonder was not any technology. It was the simple truth that they had done the impossible. They had escaped a cage built by gods and found a new home among the stars. And they were only getting started. In schools across 500 worlds, children learned the story of the Exodus. They learned about Doctor and her impossible engine, about Director and his secret project, about Admiral and the hidden fleet, about Ambassador and the message that started it all. But the most important lesson was not about any single person. It was about what humans could do when they worked together, when they refused to give up, when they looked at the impossible and said, "Let us try anyway." The Council had called humanity dangerous. They had been right. Humanity was dangerous to anyone who believed that limits could not be broken. Dangerous to anyone who thought the old ways were the only ways. Dangerous to anyone who forgot that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. And now, free at last, humanity was finally showing what they could truly become. The story was far from over. There were more galaxies to explore, more species to meet, more impossible things to accomplish. The universe was vast beyond measure, and humanity intended to see all of it. But that is a tale for another time. For now, it is enough to know that the cage is empty, the prisoners are free, and somewhere in the light of unfamiliar stars, 8 billion human hearts beat with the fire of endless possibility. The Council reacted seconds too slow. Humanity had already escaped, and they were never coming back to the cage again.